The debate on the benefits and flaws in the economic partnership agreement between the EU and CARIFORUM states continues even on the eve of the historic signing.
CGX Energy Incorporated has commenced three-dimensional seismic tests on its Guyana offshore concession just off the quarantine.
And Agriculture Minister Robert Prasad says development within the forestry sector is not meant to impede private operations, but to ensure that the industry is protected.
The details of these and other stories, GLA News, health tips, and of course the latest sporting action in the Diamond Mineral Water and NCN Sport News after these. Good evening, I am Janelle Prasad.
And I'm Paul Moore.
With this edition of the 6 o'clock news for today, Wednesday, October 14, 2008. Here's what's happening.
Thanks, Janelle. The debate on the benefits and flaws in the economic partnership agreement between the European Union and CARIFORUM countries is still on a high, even as regional heads are making final preparations for the signing ceremony. CARICOM heads will converge in Barbados on Wednesday to ink a full deal, and Guyana is likely to be part of the Bridgetown signatories. Here are details.
Heads will sign a full economic partnership agreement with the European Union in less than 24 hours, but some specialists are still concerned about the trade deal in its current form. The latest is former Caribbean trade negotiator Sir Sridhar Ramphal, who feels the global financial crisis and the EPA spell economic disaster for CARIFORUM countries. He had reaffirmed his stand that the region should not sign the deal at this time, since there is no legal or moral reason for it to do so. Sir Sridhar said the agreement was made in Europe with the framework of a crumbling economic order and the assumptions it imposed. However, President Bharat Jagdeo has been the lone CARICOM head fighting to have the trade deal amended before signing. The Guyanese leader did manage to get the EU to include the clause for a mandatory review of the trade pact every 5 years.
I'm continuing to be hopeful that good sense will prevail and our region will continue to press for that particular clause, because I think Europe has agreed to the second one in its entirety.
But European Union Ambassador to Guyana, Geert Hykins, says the deal in its current form will yield significant benefits to the Caribbean region.
After the signing, and I like to repeat, the signing is urgent because the agreement as it is now, duty-free, quota-free, without having notified the WTO, is challenged. There are countries it's not WTO totally confirmed, in lieu with, and we are applying this duty-free and quota-free arrangement since the 1st of January.
Meanwhile, a recent article out of Brussels says the EU was preparing to impose heavy taxes on goods from Guyana as a punishment for not signing the trade deal, but the ambassador says he does not see it that way.
I don't think that we have any intention to punish. So if you're asking is punishment the true word, I would say no, it isn't. What might happen if for those countries who are not signing the EPA, yes, and we have to notify after the signing the WTO, yes, so if they are not signing, there is no agreement for them, yes, then we don't have a WTO.
The signing of the EPA takes place in Barbados on Wednesday, October 15. Edward Lane, the 6 o'clock news.
In the meantime, a senior trade negotiator told NCN today from his Bridgetown, Barbados office he is outraged that some regional heads are at the 11th hour attempting to take praise for the addition of the 2 compromise clauses of the EPA. The senior Foreign Service officer, who wished to remain anonymous, said had the regional heads held out, many more compromise clauses could have been added to the deal. Agriculture Minister Robert Prasad says development within the forestry sector is not meant to impede private operations, but to ensure that the industry is protected. This was in response to statements made by Barama CEO Girwal Lalaram at the Guyana Forestry Commission earlier today. More in this report.
According to CEO of Barama Girwar Lalram, the Guyana Forestry Commission should be working to adopt an advisory role rather than imposing hefty compensation fees and penalties on private operators. He has cited the 2% commission on exports as an impediment for the industry and says part of this could be used to develop value-added mechanisms.
The underperformance of the primary production due to restrictive and punitive measures by GFC recently has resulted in a shortage of logs to the local sawmilling operations and ultimately adversely affect also the value-added industry.
The Barama CEO says there is also need for a more comprehensive working plan to address improper mining practices and encourage Amerindian communities to operate in the mainstream enterprise. However, Agriculture Minister Robert Prasad says government has always strived to consult with stakeholders before developing industry-related policies. He also sought to clarify the issue of commissions charged by the GFC.
And let me say, that is where the GFC gets its resources to manage or to regulate the forestry sector. That is where you get the $32 or more million per annum that was being spent on the FPMC and that will be required to be spent on this new council. Where else do you think the money comes from?
He notes that like developed countries, government hopes that one day the private sector can manage the industry. Until then, government is charged with effectively running various operations.
So these are things we must not keep repeating ad nauseum. They are necessary. The government has been very definitive on these policy approaches. And you cannot, on the one hand, expect resources to be spent on the development of the sector and then on the other hand say, well, do away with the means by which you garner those resources.
Minister Prasad says there is also active collaboration with Amerindian communities and has pledged his ministry's continued commitment to engage with all stakeholders on matters of importance. Reporting for the 6 o'clock news, I'm Shardalal.
And with some news just in, the government of Guyana has today confirmed that the Guyanese registered MV Lady Chandra 1 was seized by the Surinamese military at 13:30 hours while traveling in the Corentyne River, which enjoys the status of a border river separating Guyana and Suriname. MV Lady Chandra 1 has reportedly been boarded by the Surinamese and is being escorted by 3 military vessels to the Surinamese port of Nikeri. A release from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says this provocation is the latest in the series that has seen recurrent interventions by the Surinamese against Guyanese shipping in the Corentyne River. Previously, Guyana had formally dispatched a diplomatic note protesting to the government of Suriname against such actions, all to no avail and without any response. In its September 17th arbitral award, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea had ruled on the maritime dispute between Guyana and Suriname and found that a resort to the use of force by Suriname offended international norms and practices. Guyana, in responding to this latest action, is closely monitoring this development and intends to take all necessary steps to safeguard its national interests. Additionally, this most recent act of provocation is being drawn to the attention of the Secretaries General of both the United Nations and CARICOM. CGX Energy Incorporated has commenced 3-dimensional seismic tests on its Guyana offshore concession just off the Corentyne. The company is participating with YPF Guyana Limited, a subsidiary of Repsol YPF, in conducting the exercise, which was originally held up due to a delay of its equipment. Edward Lane has the details.
As CGX released today said, the company is pleased that the program has now commenced after a delay in the vessel arriving in Guyana due to weather in the Caribbean. President and CEO of CGX, Kerry Sully, says during the current global credit crisis, his company is fortunate to be fully funded for the program, which cost some $16 million. CGX, a Canadian-based oil and gas exploration company, focused on exploring for oil in Guyana and is financed internationally. However, last year, a UN tribunal on the Law of the Sea ruled in Guyana's favor, and most of the oil exploration company's concession was retained. CGX was awarded concession in the Essequibo, Demerara, and Berbice offshore areas. Exxon announced in September that it will commence a seismic search in the Corentyne River. However, it was not clear whether those activities have restarted. Meanwhile, CGX Energy Inc. on Tuesday formally announced it is resuming the search for crude oil, deposits in partnership with another firm in a concession off the Guyana shore with a more modern high-tech program. In a statement received here, the company confirmed that a 3-dimensional seismic program will allow for them to better locate huge oil deposits previous surveys have indicated are in the concession block. President Barrett Jagdeo at a media conference recently told reporters that he is satisfied that some effort is being made in this area. Edward Lane, the 6 o'clock news.